I folded the letter twice and slid it back under the register drawer, the same way I had every morning for the past 3 weeks. I wasn't ready to read it again. I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready. But that was near the end. Let me start where it actually began. I turned 62 the autumn I almost lost everything. My husband Raymond had been gone 4 years by then, and the laundromat we built together 22 machines, a little folding counter along the back wall. The smell of warm cotton, that I had come to think of as home, was bleeding money the way an old wound bleeds when you forget to keep pressure on it. Steady, quiet, relentless. The building's heating system had failed twice that winter. The coin mechanisms on 6 of the dryers were jamming. I'd had to let go of my part-time helper, a college girl named Brianna who used to bring me coffee on Tuesdays. I was doing everything alone. Open at 6, close at 9, mop the floors myself, count the quarters myself, drive home to an empty house in Millbrook, Indiana, and sit at the kitchen table until I was too tired to sit anymore. My son Daniel called every Sunday. He lived in Charlotte with his wife and their 2 little boys, and every Sunday he said the same thing. Mom, just sell it. Come down here, we have the room. And every Sunday I said the same thing back. I'm fine, sweetheart. I'm managing. I was not managing. It was a Tuesday in February, just before 7 in the morning, when I found him. I had come in early because machine number 14 had been making a grinding noise the day before, and I wanted to check it before the morning rush. The rush, I should tell you, was not much of a rush anymore. Maybe a dozen customers between 7 and noon. But still, I liked to be ready. I unlocked the back door off the alley, the one I used for deliveries, and nearly stepped on him. He was sitting against the dumpster with his knees pulled up and his chin resting on his chest, a gray wool cap pulled low, a jacket that had once been green but had faded to the color of old grass. He had a canvas bag between his feet and a paperback book face down on top of it, and for one terrible second I thought he was dead. Then he coughed. I must have made a sound because his head came up fast, and I saw his eyes pale blue, sharp in a way that startled me, like 2 windows in an otherwise shuttered house. I'm sorry, he said immediately. His voice was rough but clear. I'll move. I'll go right now. It's 17 degrees, I said. That was all I could think to say. He started to get up, moving with the careful slowness of a man whose joints had been arguing with him for years. He looked to be somewhere in his late 60s. Maybe older. His face was weathered. His beard needed attention. But there was something in the way he held himself, even in that moment, something composed and unhurried, that made him seem less like a man in trouble and more like a man who had simply made a practical decision about where to spend the night. You can come inside, I said, for a few minutes, to warm up. He looked at me steadily. You don't have to do that. I know I don't. He followed me in without another word. I made him sit at the folding counter and I put a cup of coffee in front of him from my thermos. He wrapped both hands around it and looked at the machines the way I've seen mechanics look at engines, not casually, but with genuine attention. Number 3 is off balance, he said after a moment. You can tell by the way she settles. You'll have a bearing issue inside 6 months if you don't shim the feet. I looked at him. Sorry, he said. I used to, I'm sorry. Thank you for the coffee. His name was Walter. That was all he offered at first, and I didn't push. He had been in Millbrook for about 2 weeks, passing through, he said, though he said it in a way that suggested he had been passing through for quite some time. He asked if there was anything he could do to earn the coffee. I almost said no. I almost said the polite thing and sent him on his way. Instead, I heard myself say, "Can you look at machine 14? He could. He spent 40 minutes on that machine with a set of small tools he produced from his canvas bag, not a full kit, just a few specific things, worn smooth with use, and when he stood up he said, "Tension pulley." It was about to go. You'd have had a belt snapped by the weekend. I asked him where he'd learned to do that. "I've had a lot of years," he said. "You learn things." He left after that. I told myself that was that. He came back the next morning. Not asking for anything. He was just there when I unlocked the back door, sitting in the same spot, and this time I didn't hesitate. I let him in, gave him coffee, and while I was opening up the front, he quietly checked the coin mechanism on number 7 and had it running clean before my first customer walked in. By the end of that week, he was just there. Every morning. He'd work through the small things I'd been putting off for months: the flickering light over the folding counter, the seal on the utility sink, the latch on the back door that had never quite caught right since Raymond replaced it himself 3 years before he died. Walter fixed it in 8 minutes. Raymond, God rest him, had spent an entire Saturday afternoon on that latch and never did get it to sit right. I want to be careful about how I describe those early weeks, because I don't want you to think it was simple or that I was naive. I was neither. I had lived 62 years in the world, and I was not in the habit of trusting strangers. But there was something about Walter that was, I keep coming back to the word, careful. He was careful with everything he touched, careful with my machines, careful with my customers, the few he interacted with, careful, above all, with the boundaries of whatever arrangement had grown up between us without either of us quite naming it. He slept in the supply room. That happened gradually. A cold snap came in the 3rd week that dropped the temperature to 4 below, and I had a cot in the supply room that I'd kept since Raymond used to nap on it during long shifts. And I told Walter he could use it until the weather broke. The weather broke. He stayed. Neither of us said anything about it. Daniel found out in April. He came up for Easter, and of course it took him about 4 minutes inside the laundromat to notice that the light was fixed, and the latch was fixed, and the dryers were humming at a different pitch than the last time he'd visited. And then he noticed the cot through the open supply room door and Walter's canvas bag sitting next to it. "Mom," he said, in the voice he uses when he is trying very hard not to raise his voice. "Who is sleeping in your supply room?" I explained. Daniel listened. When I was done, there was a long silence, and then he said, "I want to meet him." Walter came back from lunch. He always took a walk at noon. 2 miles exactly. I later learned, a habit he'd had for decades, and I introduced them. They shook hands. Daniel asked Walter a few careful questions. Walter answered them directly and without elaboration. When Daniel and I were alone again, he said, "Mom, I don't know about this." "He fixed the bearing on number 3, I said. "Your father never even noticed number 3. Daniel gave me a look that meant the conversation wasn't over, but he went back to Charlotte and didn't say anything more about it. The months turned. Summer came, and the laundromat started to do a little better. Not dramatically, I want to be honest about that. It wasn't that Walter transformed the business overnight, but things stopped breaking. The machines ran smoother and stayed running. And Walter, I came to realize, had a particular gift I hadn't expected. He was extraordinary with the customers. Not in a salesman way, not chatty. He was quiet, mostly, but he noticed things. He noticed when Mrs. Peterson, who came every Thursday with her 2 grandsons, was struggling to lift the laundry baskets, and he started having a cart ready for her without being asked. He noticed that the young man who came in late on Friday nights, the one who always looked exhausted, always ran out of quarters, and Walter started keeping a roll of quarters behind the counter and made change for him without commentary. He noticed that the older gentleman who came every other Saturday, a retired teacher named Mr. Hicks, who had lost his wife the year before, always folded his laundry very slowly, the way you fold laundry when you're not ready to go home yet, and Walter would sit down across from him, and they would fold together in silence. I watched all of this happen, and I thought about what it meant that a man clearly capable of extraordinary attentiveness had ended up sleeping on a cot in my supply room. I thought about it, and then I did what I had learned to do in the years since Raymond died. I let myself not know the answer and kept moving forward anyway. I started paying him $30 a day, which was what I could manage. He argued with me about it. I told him he could argue or he could take the money, but he couldn't do both. He took the money. He spent almost none of it, as far as I could tell. He read constantly. Serious books, physics, engineering texts, history of science. He had a worn copy of something called Control Systems Engineering that he returned to so often the spine had broken and been retaped twice. I asked him about it once. He said, "It's like visiting an old neighborhood. Things look different when you've been away for a while." I did not ask him what he meant by that. I was learning, slowly, that Walter answered questions only as fully as he chose to, and that pushing yielded nothing except a polite and complete change of subject. That October, I got the letter from the bank. I had known it was coming. In the way you sometimes know bad news before it arrives, the way a storm has a particular quality of silence before it breaks. I had been behind on the commercial loan. Raymond had taken out a second commercial loan to buy the last 4 machines in 2019, and between the heating repairs and the mechanic fees and everything else, I had missed 2 payments. Then 3. The letter said I had 60 days to bring the account current or the property would enter foreclosure proceedings. The number I needed to pay was not enormous in the abstract $18,400, but it was impossible for me in that moment. I had $4,000 in the business account. I had some in savings, but not enough, and using all of it would leave me with nothing for operations. I read the letter at the folding counter after closing, and then I sat there for a while in the quiet of the machines. Walter came in from his evening walk. He knew immediately. He was like that, attuned to the atmosphere of a room, the way some people are attuned to weather. "Something happened," he said. It wasn't a question. I handed him the letter without thinking about it. He read it once, set it down, looked at the folding counter for a long moment with that particular focused stillness he had. The kind of stillness that isn't passive, but is the opposite of passive, a stillness that is actually a form of intense attention. "I'd like to help," he said. "Walter, you make $30 a day." He looked up at me then, and there was something in his expression I had not seen there before. Not hesitation exactly. More like the expression of a man who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has just decided it's time to set it down. "I need to tell you some things," he said. "I should have told you sooner. I'm sorry I didn't." I sat down. He was quiet for a moment, arranging the words in some private order. Then he said, "My full name is Walter Ashford Greer. Before I came here, before I was passing through, before all of that, I spent 31 years as an aerospace engineer. Guidance systems primarily. Control systems for satellite navigation. I hold 14 patents." He let that sit. "The last 3 are still active," he said. "There's a licensing agreement with a defense contractor that's been generating royalties since 2018. I stopped paying attention to it, to any of it, after Margaret died. After my son, after things fell apart, I just stopped." He paused. "I have an attorney in Cincinnati. He's been managing things. I called him yesterday. I found my voice. Walter, the account," he said, "is larger than I had been tracking. Significantly larger." He reached into his jacket and produced a folded piece of paper. He set it on the folding counter and smoothed it once with his palm, the way you smooth a thing you've been folding and unfolding. "This is what he told me." I looked at the paper. I looked at it for a long time. The number on it was $4,300,000. Accumulated royalties, real property, stock in a company I had never heard of, a retirement account that had been accruing for decades untouched. I put the paper down. "I don't understand," I said. "Why were you Walter? You were sleeping outside in February, in 17-degree weather. You were sleeping against my dumpster." He was quiet for a moment. "Margaret and I had a son," he said. "James. He died 5 years ago, car accident. He was 34. He said it the way people say the unbearable things, precisely, with no decoration, because there is no decoration that helps. After that, the house felt I couldn't be in it. I left. I didn't take anything. I just walked out and I kept walking. For 3 years, I slept wherever there was a place to sleep. I ate whatever there was to eat. I told myself I was seeing the country, but I was really I wasn't ready to be a person yet. Not a full person." He looked at his hands. "And then I found here," he said, "and you gave me coffee and didn't ask questions. I wasn't ready to answer. And I thought maybe here I can start being a person again." I was crying. I want to be honest about that. I am 62 years old, and I have not been ashamed of my tears in a long time. "You're already a person," I said. "You've been a person this whole time." He reached into his bag and produced a check. "This is from my attorney," he said. "It will cover the bank and leave you enough to replace the heating system and the 2 oldest dryers." He paused. "I want you to take it as a loan if that's easier. You can pay me back $30 a day." I laughed at that, even through the tears. "That's 30 years, Walter. I'm not going anywhere," he said. "I want to tell you what happened after. Because it didn't go the way you might expect. Daniel came up that weekend. I told him everything, the patents, the attorney, the check, all of it. He sat at my kitchen table and listened without interrupting, which is not like Daniel at all. When I was done, he said, "Mom, are you sure about this?" "About him? I've spent a year watching him," I said. "He has never once been anything less than exactly what he appears to be, which turns out to be more than I knew. But still, people take advantage." "Walter has $4 million, I said. "He is not taking advantage of me." Daniel sat with that for a while. Then he said, "He lost a son." "Yes. And he just walked away from his life." "Yes." He was quiet. "My son is not an easy man. He is careful, like his father was, careful with affection and with trust, and he takes time to arrive at conclusions. But he arrives. Does he need anything?" Daniel said finally. "Like practically. Does he have a doctor? Has he seen a doctor?" That was when I knew it was going to be all right. Walter did see a doctor. Dr. Farrell over on Elm, who said he was in remarkable health for a man who had spent 3 years outdoors. Walter also, eventually, started making calls to Cincinnati himself. He opened a proper account at First National on Meridian Street. He bought new boots, which he needed badly, and a better jacket, which he also needed, and that was all he bought for himself for a very long time. He did one other thing. 2 months after the night at the folding counter, Walter sat down at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a mechanical pencil. He always used a mechanical pencil, never a pen. I'd noticed, and he spent 4 evenings writing something. He wouldn't tell me what it was. On the 5th evening, he handed me 11 pages of close, neat handwriting and said, "I'd like you to read this." It was a story about James, about what James was like as a little boy, how he could fix anything with his hands by the time he was 9, how he used to disassemble his toys, not to break them, but because he wanted to understand the mechanism, how he grew up into a man who taught high school physics in Dayton and was beloved by his students in the way only a few teachers ever are. About the accident, about the years after. I read it twice without looking up. When I finished, I set the pages down, and Walter was watching me from across the table. "I haven't told that story out loud before," he said. "Not all of it. To anyone." "Thank you for telling me," I said. He nodded once, that small, precise nod he has. "I think," he said slowly, "that I might want to tell it somewhere. Somewhere it might help someone. I'm not sure where." "I know a channel," I said. Which is how Walter Greer, retired aerospace engineer, holder of 14 patents, formerly of the alley beside Meridian Laundry in Millbrook, Indiana, came to be sitting in front of my phone one Sunday afternoon in April while I pressed record. I still run the laundromat. The heating system is new. Dryers 7 and 12 are new. Number 3 is running so smooth you'd never know she'd been on borrowed time. Walter is still there. He doesn't sleep in the supply room anymore. He's renting a small house 3 blocks away, nothing fancy, a yard that he's started doing something with in the back, though he won't say yet what the plan is. He walks 2 miles at noon. He still has the worn copy of Control Systems Engineering, though I think he's reading it differently now. He still has coffee with me every morning before I open. My son Daniel brought the boys up last summer. My grandsons are 8 and 6, and by the end of the first afternoon, the 8-year-old was following Walter around, asking about everything he touched, wanting to know how it worked, why it worked, what would happen if you changed this part or that part. I stood in the doorway watching them, and I thought of what Walter had written about James at 9 years old. I didn't say anything about it. Some things don't need to be said out loud to be understood. What I will say is this. When I nearly lost everything, the loan, the machines, the building Raymond and I built our life around, I thought the crisis was financial. And it was, partly. But what I would have truly lost, if Walter had not been there, if I had not opened that back door on a February morning and found a man sitting in the cold who needed to be warm, and also, without quite knowing it yet, needed to be found, what I would have lost was something harder to name. The willingness to see people, the habit of it, of looking past the obvious surface of things toward what might actually be there. Raymond used to say that the most expensive mistakes he ever made were the times he assumed he already knew what something was worth before he looked at it properly. I think about that a lot now. I think about all the February mornings I might have closed the back door and gone about my business. Walter told me once, after the story came out and people started leaving comments and writing in, that the thing he remembered most about that first morning was the coffee. Not that I let him inside. Not that I asked about the machine. The coffee. The thermos coffee before anything else. It's just coffee, I said. It was 7 in the morning and it was 17 degrees, he said. And you didn't say, here's some coffee before I figure out what to do with you. You just gave it to me. Like it was the obvious thing. I suppose it was. I suppose it still is. He brings his own thermos now. Some mornings we sit at the folding counter before I flip the sign and we drink our coffee and we don't talk much, and the machines are quiet around us. And the light comes in through the front window at a low winter angle and falls on the floor in a long pale stripe, and I think this is it. This, right here. This is the thing you can't put a number on. The bank was paid in November. On December 1st, I drove to First National and made my first payment back to Walter, $30 in quarters. He counted them with great seriousness and put them in his jacket pocket. 11,000. 190 months to go, he said. I'll be 158 years old, I said. We'd better keep the machines running, he said. And we do.